Welcome back to Grappling in Thought. You know how when something happens and you think about it over and over, you think about every detail, you replay it, how they said it, the words they used, the tone they used, their body language, the look in their eyes, or you replay what you wish you would have said or done differently. You might think of that as just remembering or overthinking or overanalyzing, but it's still a form of reflecting. Today I'm going to chat about a shift you can make with what you're already doing. This remembering that you're doing, this overthinking, this analyzing everything. It's reflecting. There's a shift though that'll make a huge difference, and it'll actually take you from ending that remembering session with guilt and pressure and shame and embarrassment, and actually see yourself differently and understand yourself better, understand how the situation, the interaction, why you said and did the things you did. And it'll help you look forward with a little more light instead of not wanting to look forward. Strategic remembering. That's how I think of reflection. And you're already doing the remembering part. You're already sitting there spending the time thinking and replaying what happened. So now making a shift will help because it's remembering. It's just strategically remembering. It's remembering with a purpose, with intention. The focus is more on yourself and internal than on everything else. What happened, what they did, how they said it, what they said, how their body language was. It's not about blame. It's about looking inside. It's actually about understanding yourself in that place, in that situation. It's your place in that situation. Often when we're remembering, we're just replaying what happened and creating stories in our head that sadly they often support our insecurities and our fears. And then what comes from that is usually the feelings of guilt, embarrassment, shame, resentment. And if we don't criticize ourselves and turn on ourselves, the other thing we often do is put all the blame on everybody else. Put the blame on them or the situation. I acted like this because this happened, or because they said this, or they did this. But when we do that, we give all the control away. We have no control over ourselves is what we're saying. Because I acted like this because you did that. Where's your control? Because there's only one thing in this life that we actually have true control over, and it's ourselves. We don't have control over anybody else. We don't have control over what somebody says, what they do, how they think, how they act. We don't even have control over how they perceive us and what we do and say. We don't get to control that. We only control who we are and how we act and what we say and what we think and what we do. And so when we say we did this because they did that, we're giving all of our control of ourselves to everybody else, to the outside world. And then what I call that is being a pinball in life. We're just reacting to this. This happens, we react to that. This happens, we react to that. And we're just reacting all over the place, going back and forth like a pinball. We have no focus because we're too busy reacting to everything. We're too busy bouncing off this, bouncing off that. And then if we're not doing that, we're thinking, remembering what they did and why I'm mad, and then the next thing happens, and then we're thinking about that. And it's just a distraction to our life because we don't have time to be focused on what we actually want to be doing, where we want to be going. We're too busy bouncing around. And so when we can strategically remember, it brings our focus back in. So how do we do that? The most important step is get really, really curious. Be genuinely curious about what you're thinking about, what you're remembering. And so if we're not blaming what happened or blaming the other person, we have to look at ourselves. we have to look at our place in the situation. What in us got triggered? There's a psychologist and author, Gabor Maté, and he says, and I love this analogy. It's like a wound. What wound in you is getting scratched? So you think of like if you get a scratch on your arm and it scabs and you catch it on a sweater or something and it hurts, it bleeds a little and it stings. That's how I think of these wounds within us. So when somebody says something and you get triggered and it pokes at something, I always think, what wound in me is getting scratched? What did that comment, what in me got bothered by that comment? So it's looking at within us what's getting bothered, what got pulled out or pushed or poked, what in us got upset about it. Because we can't blame other people because then we're giving our control away. But you have to get really curious because when we're blaming other people, we're not curious. When we're criticizing ourselves, that's just judgment. That's not That's not being curious. Be interested in yourself. Curiosity is compassion and interest, genuinely wanting to know, genuinely interested in the answer. We have to be careful in our tone because sometimes we'll say, why did I do that? But how does that sound? It sounds very accusatory and judgmental, critical. So we have to be careful with our tone with ourselves. Nobody wants to be accused of something, even when it's from ourselves. And so being curious has a softness to it. It's like when you meet somebody and you're interested in them, or you're learning about something that you're interested in, you're just curious. You want to know more. You're not judging. You're not critical. You're just interested. And so if we can get to that place of curiosity, of softness, of compassion, of interest, of ourselves in that situation, it'll change the way you start remembering things. It's going to change the way you replay it. You're going to think of what they said, but then that next step is more of, where was I? Where was my mindset? Where was my energy? Where was my mood? What in me got poked or scratched or whatever, bothered by that situation? Reflection is a chance to see how you maybe would have shown up differently, how you would or could have said something different, or how things went better than expected. And why? What in you was different, or what did you do that made things different? It gives you the opportunity to look at what choice you made led to where you are today. The different choices you make and how they lead and how they take you on these paths. Reflecting allows you to understand in your mind where you did right, where you did good, and where maybe you could have done better. It lets you see that. It's not all about looking at the bad. You want to look at both, the good and the bad. Because when we can see, okay, I caught myself and I paused and then I responded, versus I didn't catch myself, I didn't pause, and I reacted out of anger or out of emotion. When you can see the difference, it lets you see where your mindset was when you were able to catch yourself, when you were able to pause, and when you were able to intentionally respond. It lets you see that pattern, that process. You think of it like a TV show. If you're watching a show, we have a different perspective of the people in the show. So we can be like, oh, don't do that, or oh, this is going to happen. We have that kind of bird's eye view, that stepped back view that we can see. And when you reflect, when you strategically remember, and you're able to look at yourself almost from a backed out view. You get to see things differently. You get a different perspective of it, a different view of the situation and of how you acted and responded and behaved and spoke. You can see it just almost like a TV show. Now, I know when we go inward, it can be scary because it can bring up a lot of feelings of insecurities, fear, guilt, resentment towards ourselves, anger towards ourselves, embarrassment, shame. It can bring up a lot. When I started reflecting, those feelings came up, and it was shitty feelings. But I kept doing it, and just in little increments. When I very first started reflecting, I would do it on Saturday and Sunday mornings after Friday evening out, all day Saturday, Saturday night out with friends. And then in the mornings, on Saturday morning, Sunday morning, I would strategically think about the previous night, previous day. And yeah, there would be a lot of times when I would be thinking about what I said and why I said this or why I didn't say that, or how I acted or how I responded to somebody. And I didn't like it. I didn't like it. And in the very beginning, the sessions would be really short because I didn't like the feelings that were coming up. But I kept doing it because there was something about it that was pulling me in. Because I kept thinking, if I ignore it, if I don't do this, nothing changes. And I don't like who I'm being in those situations. So I wanted to change who I was being in those situations. But I knew if I didn't look at those situations and if I didn't look at myself in those situations, nothing was going to change. We can avoid it, sure, but nothing's going to change. You're going to still feel that wanting more, wanting to be different. You're going to still have those shameful moments. You're still going to do the remembering. It's just not going to be strategic. And you're going to end up continuing to remember, end those remembering sessions with guilt, shame, embarrassment. And you're going to have to do more to distract yourself from those feelings. But if we still want to do better, if we still want to have different responses, if we still want to do different in those situations, we have to face them. And so you have to go inward. You have to face this. You can't do different without actually going through it. And so sitting with yourself and working through those moments, reflecting and working through that with yourself is how I've found to actually work through it and actually make changes and be different in those situations, catch myself. Reflection is where I learn to catch myself, pause, and choose differently. Because the shame and the guilt and the resentment and embarrassment, those feelings and working through them is actually what helped catch myself. Because I was like, okay, I've been here, I've reflected on this moment, I'm going to do different here. I don't want to repeat it. But if you don't think about it and reflect on it, how are you going to do any different? Why are you going to do differently? You might go way to the other side and just be like, oh, I'm never going out again. I'm not going to talk to this person again. But that's not going to get you anywhere. That's not real growth. That's avoidance. That's the distractions. That's not actual growth. Putting yourself in that position and changing how you respond. That's growth. Learning from that situation. Saying, okay, next time I'm going to do differently. And reflection gets you there because you're thinking about how you actually responded and why. You're learning about yourself. You're understanding what in you got triggered. So then next time you catch yourself. It's like, oh, That caught that. That scratched that wound again. I'm going to do differently here because I don't have to. I don't have to pinball off that. And so, though it can be scary, you got to go through it. You have to face those feelings and look at yourself in order to get through it and do differently. Okay, next week I'm going to go into detail of how I actually reflect, how I go about it. But this week, try to just find 10 minutes this week to strategically remember a situation. Try to get really, really curious about what was going on with yourself within that situation. Remember, curiosity is softness, compassion, genuinely interested. Ask yourself, what in me got bothered? And here's the challenge. The answer to that question cannot be because so-and-so did or said this or because this situation happened. That's the challenge. Be curious. Let me know in the comments how it goes. So until next week, keep looking forward, catch the moment, pause, and choose how you want to go forward. See you next week.